In the previous video, we talked about how to use the array list to create the string array list or other data type. So in this video, we will using the array list that's create an account data type array list. So then we will add multiple account object into the array list. Then we will see how can we using array list to help us to find a specific account. So we see, for example, let's create an array list that's the data type holding its account object. So we call that the list. So after we create the array list account, then you have the list object reference to the array list. So this array list, since we already defined here is data type is account, you can skip this angle bracket again in the constructor. So when we create the list to holding different account object, then we can add 2 account and 2 CD account. So here, because in lab exercise and previous assignment in assignment 6, I asked you guys to create a CD account class. So this CD account class actually is inherited from account. So that's why when I create the array list, the data type is account object. I can add a regular account object. I also can add a CD account object into the account list. So that's why you see we specify the ID balance. And for CD, we specify the account ID number, balance, and duration. So sometimes we just add one by one. And sometimes when we create the account object, maybe we just random to have the ID number. So that's why sometimes if we mix all the account and CD account together, how can I find for my customer? If my customer tell me their account ID is 1,000 or just 4,000. So that's why here we want to show you in array list. Remember we show you in the array list, we have couple important member function like contents, or we can use the index of. So this contains, right? So sometimes I have like the string earlier we show you, I can find the my army CD name. So we just using the my army, we check the string content is equal to Miami. I can find that to see I have Miami or not. But one thing is here, when we become using for array list for the account object, how can I looking for my account ID 1,000? Okay, so how can I using the contents method? Right, so that's why here we need to remind you, actually, did you remember we have the equals method, right? So we have equals method actually when we're using the array list. When we call the contents method, they will compare the passing object is the same of the one of the object in the array list or not. So when they check if they are the same or not, actually they don't use the equal operator. They call equals method. So that's why if you want to using contents method from the array list, you need to make sure this data type using to create the array list, they has to override the equals method. Why overriding the equals method? Because did you remember equals method actually came from where? Equals method beginning is we define in the object class. So then afterward, actually, right, all the subclass, they all inherited this equals method. But in the object class, when you use the equals method to compare two objects, actually we're just using the equal operator to find the two objects are the same location or not. However, when we do the account, actually, I don't know what is my original account object look like. For example, for the customer come to you, they only know their ID is what. So can I using just the ID to looking for the corresponding account? You can, if you override this equals method. So if you override this equals method in the account class to using account ID to compare the two objects, are they equals or not, then the contents method, when they being called in the array list, they were using the equals method from the account class. So then they will compare the ID number. So that's what we see here. How should we compare the object using the equals method? So the equals method, just like the toString method, they are defined in the object class. So originally in the object class, they declare and defined equals method like this. So they will have the return type is Boolean, method name equals, and the object passing is object. So then you can see they just compare this equal to the passing object or not. Right? You see, this one is another way to use this keyword. This keyword represents the host object. So when we call the equals method, actually it's the host object invoke equals method. So then we have passing object. So that's why to test if two objects store the same data, then you cannot using this equals method. In order to compare your object using the same data like the string, string actually override the equals method in the string class. So you can override the equals method in your subclass. So they test depends on what variable you want in the two objects to be equal. So like earlier we say, remember string class, we test the equals method actually we content, are they have identical content or not. So that's why in our account class, we need to override the equals method. Then we just compare the account ID. So that's here, we will see how the circle class first, we see here. This example I just showed you, for example, the circle class, this one actually I showed you last week. On the circle class, if I want to compare two circle class, are they equal to each other? We check the radius, right? So actually here, I want to give you the final version for the equals method. Because when you want to override the equals method in the circle class, the first thing we need to do the @override keyword. Then since you overwrite, your method signature need to be exactly the same as the object class. So that's why you see here, the passing parameter is what? Yeah, it's an object. So sometimes maybe the passing the object here is not a circle class. It's not the circle object. So that's why we shouldn't allow this non-circle object to compare to our host circle object. So that's why since you're using this equals method in the subclass, so in order to make sure the passing argument here, the O, is really referred to the circle object. So we have to using the instance of. So this instance of can help us to check this passing argument, even we're using the object reference variable, but we need to make sure they really refer to the circle object. So we only compare if O is a circle object. If that's true, right, continue. We just check the radius. So if the host object radius equal to the passing argument radius, right, why we need to do the casting here? And also what kind of casting we have here? Right, this one is what? Is the down casting. right? Remember, because you passing an argument, but here I need to find the radius from this object reference reflow. So then we need to make sure here actually O is an object variable. O cannot invoke radius. So that's why the first thing we need to do, downcasting. Right, so you see here, when we override the equals method, because you're passing the argument using the object reference. So that's why the first thing we need to check, this actual object is an instance of circle or not. Then most of the time you want to access the data attribute actually is specific for this subclass. So that's why you need to do the downcasting. So if this passing argument really is an instance of circle, I check. Otherwise, I always return false. So that's the equals method. So now your turn. Can you overwrite the equals method in the student class? So in the student class, I want to check. I want to compare two student objects. Their ID is the same or not. So that's my equals method. Right, so that's why here, if we want to override the equals method in a count class, they will be similar like circle class, will be look like this. You're still passing the object O. So before you do the comparison, you need to check if this O is instance of a count. So after you're done, right, you see earlier we do the casting together in one line. So here, actually, you can do in one line as well. But the same thing, you can also create another reference that's for A. So then we do the casting first. So you do the downcasting first, then you just compare. So either way, you're using these two lines or combined with one line. They are all mean the same thing. So only the O passing argument is the instance of a count I compare. Otherwise, I just return false. So that's the equals method in the account class. So after we have this equals method, we can go back to the earlier. After I create many different account or CD account object I add to my array list, how can I looking for ID 1000 or ID 4000? So in order to check, to find that, the first thing is we need to make sure the equals method being override in the account class. So after we done this, right, so then how you will do? So when you want to find where is account ID 1000, you just need to using the contents method. So contents method, you will pass in an object. So this object actually is not the real account ID object. It's just an object we create. But the most important thing is we want to create this object to hold this ID number is 1000 to compare the real ID 1000 from my array list. So that's why here, if I do have an ID is 1000 in my array list, so I do the contents. So if that's true, good. So then I have that account ID equal to 1000. But do I know where it is? I didn't know. So that's why after we find this true, then continue, we can use the instance of. So we do the instance of, so then the same thing, you need to pass in an object. Then they will give you the index of the ID equal to 1000. So then, right, then you just need to using the get I, so you know the index, so you can get that ID equal to 1000 account. So the same thing, you can know this one is for the ID equal to 4000 account. So that's how we were looking for that. But most important thing is we already override the equals method. So some student will ask, should I always try to find the contents first? Can I just use the index of first? So actually you can, but just index of, if you don't have that object, they will return -1.